Chair, AVM Rajavaranjan, VM, ECLTS, ICT, IDS Headquarters. The moderator, Colonel K.V. Kuber, EY. And the fellow panelists, Executive Director Isaac, Mr. Abhithuraj, CTO and Founder, Strategic Alliance Incorporation, Mr. Deepak Maheshwari, Policy Consultant, and Mr. Pradeep Kumar, Co-Founder and CEO, Qubit Labs. Over to you, Chair.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to be talking about one of the most interesting and challenging subjects of today. And as we see it, we just have to understand the urgency of this. The urgency of securing our satellites against cyber threats cannot be overstated. And there is a growing 386 billion space economy as we see it. And as this grows increasingly reliant on technologies, the responsibility to protect them only intensifies. Policymakers, technology leaders, and public users must unite in this effort to prioritize and invest in satellite cybersecurity. These actions include funding research and development of advanced security technologies and implement international regulations and standards for satellite cybersecurity. As space missions and technologies grow increasingly interconnected, NASA has also released the first iteration of the space security best practices. It's a nice document to see, and they've actually laid down in a reasonable detail as to what we should do about it. And the aim is to bolster the mission cybersecurity efforts for both the public sector and the private sector space activities. The guide reflects NASA's commitment, and it is also encapsulated in a space system protection standard. And the standard has also come up very well, and it is for not just for the US or NASA, it is also applicable for global standards. Standards called 10068. So there are some fundamental questions. Will space systems be under attack in the near future? Are they currently under attack? Who is attacking? What is the adversary's attack strategy? What damage has been caused to the forces by such attack, and what should the collaborative strategy be amongst the countries to safeguard against it? So ladies and gentlemen, without wasting much time, we have an excellent panel here. I request the chairman of the session, Air Vice Marshal Rajiv Ranjan, Vice Admiral, to open the session, to give us an introductory talk. He is one person who's heading the space in the Indian Air Force, or I would call it now the Indian Air and Space Force. And he's been instrumental in developing companies, he's been instrumental in developing strategies, he's been instrumental in collaborative efforts when he was in the headquarters integrated defense staff, and now as the head of the Indian Space and Air Force, taking care of space. I request the chairman to open the session. So all yours, sir.
Jai Hind everybody, moderator, my mentors sitting in front, and my colleagues on the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, small correction, sir. I just moved out of air headquarters from the ACS space, and I look after now at headquarters IDS, something called as ICT, Information Technology, Cyber, Network, and Electronic Warfare. If 1991 first Gulf War was the first space war, then Ukraine-Russia war would be remembered as space cyber war. When the Russians, as it is claimed to be on the first day of war in February 2020, carried out attack on CARSAT of USI and disabled complete communication system with an objective to disable command and control of Ukrainian forces. So with this apprehension and the worries have risen, and which actually for me is mother of foresight. And it takes clear-eyed resolve and good deconstruction of the issues to look squarely at the emerging trend in the warfare, geopolitics, as well as technological trend, so as to draw near-term and the long-term plans. In spaces too, space and counter-space are undergoing substantial change, along with the rapid development of non-destructive form of anti-space capabilities. In this, space has become latest domain wherein the cyber and spectral warfare is becoming potent, with the satellite and other assets coming under the attack. The vastness and the remoteness of space operation and the space-based communication network and IoT present an unique challenges for the cyber security, especially for India, when the space is largely under the civilian domain until now. Where the kind of the cyber security attention was on the maybe little lower side. It may be noted that communication and space-based communication are the nervous system of any military and the operational capabilities. And if you don't protect your nervous system and various sensors associated, then you know what is going to happen to the body. Space potential risk associated with the cyber is increasing significantly, and the ranges of the attack or the vulnerability is anything from data breach to espionage to sabotage to denial of the services and loss of control over the critical assets, which could have direct consequences on the Earth and even in the space, on communication, navigation, ISR, weather, and a whole lot of other assets. Just imagine somebody were to control International Space Station and thereafter make it attack on something called as VIP-89, which is the nerve center of Indian government, parliament and the adjoining area, or disrupt the PNT system, whole railways and aviation, everything system will get collapsed. So, in era of information dominance, belligerents are aware that space-based communication or supported operations are emerging as celestial bottlenecks or the choke point. Also, in space warfare, out of the 5 center of the gravity, in the military terms, there's somebody called as John Morgan. He had articulated 5 rings of the center of gravity. The second innermost ring is TT&C. If that is neutralized, the whole space segment is neutralized. So it's very economical for us that attack the second ring, which is telemetry, tracking, and command and controlling, inclusive of all form of the communication, which is controlled by the space. Okay, this is very much part of the Northern Adversaries strategy, wherein in the first wave of the attack, they plan to make you blind, deaf, and also paralyze you so that you can't take any action. Why space is vulnerable to the cyber? Because the space assets have a long life, and the cyber domain attacks and the vulnerability changes rapidly virtually every hour. So if you have an asset which is going to be up in the air for 10 to 15 years, then you know the kind of vulnerability you are going to face. Hence, with the increasing reliance in the space-based services and the technology, cybersecurity has become vital and paramount towards not only military operation but entire gamut of national security, economy, and associated aspects. And therefore, you would also require international cooperation. International cooperation would be essential to establish cybersecurity standards, including new encryption technologies, regulatory frameworks, agreements for unified approach for shared cybersecurity standards and the best practices. Talking of the standards, primarily for me, if you have a common global standard, that's the best way of doing your business, rather than setting your own standards. So the most cybersecurity framework and standard developed for terrestrial would serve the starting point for cybersecurity for the space assets, including risk management, threat tracking, incident response through SOC, NOC, or crisis management program, or protection of the critical infrastructure. Some of the operational space policy standards, as highlighted by moderator Rupesh sir, he talked of the NASA's standards, but there is also a space policy directive 5 of US to enhance cybersecurity asset for the space assets. Also, International Organization for Standardization, some of the standards are ISO BSD 20517 or ISO ISD 2703, etc. Also, industries are getting involved. In fact, our own CIA, India, has partnered with ISAC to evolve some kind of awareness and some standards. ISAC is an Information Sharing and Analysis Center. This was being taught in the recent article by eminent personality sitting in front of us, who is a military advisor for CIA. However, the development of the specialized cyber standards and the protocol and the SOP for the military space segment is critical. And to ensure cybersecurity and resilience, and this standard must address the unique challenges of space domain and evolving threat landscape. In all these things, personally I feel there is an urgent need to evolve a common base edge compute stack, both hardware and software, which will reside in all the Indian satellites, and through which all the services in form of API gets plugged in. Also, because of this particular software, if anything goes wrong, from the ground you can do the little clicking around and get around the problem you are likely to face. I think this could form a part of one of the IDEX challenge, and we need to push very coherently so that we see this result in the next 2 to 3 years time. This particular thing would offer us a remote access to resolve emerging problems on our satellites. Such collaboration between military and space industry must be leveraged to enhance innovation in the military space segment. Additionally, adopting to the national international standard to the specific requirement of the military space system involve addressing issues such as classification level, operational security, and need for customization. Encryption. In fact, worried about the encryption, the way we are, and the Western forces are talking about encryption 2.0. From headquarter ideas, we have pushed and we have taken up issue. In fact, yesterday only we issued out a letter to various entities from the DRDO to Department of Science and Technology, other than Principal Scientific Advisor of the Government of India, all the entities we have written. We need to modernize the encryption for the armed forces. In all this process, encryption is a critical component for securing military space operation, protecting sensitive data from adversary, encryption standards and the protocol must be robust and resilient against the current as well as future threat. As I said, the life is going to be long, and also it should be safe from the quantum computing. So runtime encryption, homomorphic encryption, quantum cryptology, along with the key management would be very essential, and especially the promising QKD, PQC, etc. need special attention from us. In all this, involving R&D bodies and industry would be key in advancing the encryption technology, not only for the space but also for the terrestrial communication. Now coming to some additional measures. I think Kuber Mike is doing the task for you to tell me the time is up. Okay, I'll just take another minute. Protective cyber defense strategy through preempting and anticipating the threat must become a norm. Regular integrated cyber warfare exercise between the services and supply ecosystem involving ISRO, DRDO, industry and academy. We must start doing that. We start calling all these entities and showing them on the ground, and some form of the other has started happening, at least in my previous appointment at Air Headquarters, where in the Air Force we started calling them and started doing partnership with them. Apart from the design, so, which is basically secure by design and resilience testing and evaluation process, we must also skill our people, enhance our awareness at all levels. We must also strengthen the international cooperation for unified response to this threat, especially emanating from our northern adversary, including sharing of intel, coordinated defense strategy, the best practices, sharing, establishing of the norms for responsible behavior in space, and additional measure to better analysis activity. In conclusion, I hope at the end of the session you will be able to sensitize the military leaders, policy makers, industry partners, ourselves and industry allies, international allies, to prioritize space cyber security, lest we paralyze ourselves, blind or deafen ourselves. We must also, as a team, put a coherent and implement solution at the end of it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. That was a very fine elucidation of what is in front of us. And like the Air Vice Marshal brought out for us, international cooperation is the must. If somebody is thinking that they can do it all by themselves, we are talking about a domain that we are not aware of. So I can only go back to the Gayatri Mantra. If people have understood the Gayatri Mantra, I would like to explain that to you now. Om Bhu. Om Bhu is earth. We are talking about the earth. Om Bhuvaha. Bhuvaha is what we are now talking about, the space. And I don't know how many planets are there, I don't know how many stars are there, I don't know what type of debris has been created in the recent past. And is there a real estate over there? Is there an area that we can talk about as to what is the area that we are supposed to defend? And are there slots, and how are these slots placed? And then there's a lot of confusion. We talk about Geo, Leo, Neo and all that. And then I don't know what really is happening. And therefore, I think what the Air Vice Marshal said to us about the common global standards, we will talk about that. We will talk about international cooperation. And so while you were talking, actually, I didn't think of time at all because it was so engrossing, so I just left it. So I just want to bring about one small issue, and that is, let me read it out. Reaching new heights in civilian and defense space technology cooperation. Have you heard of it in the audience? Have you heard of this statement? This is part of the ISET that has just been signed between the two NSAs, the US and India. And out of the 8 8 major disciplines that they have identified. The stands at number 2, reaching new heights in civilian and defense space technology cooperation. And we want to see what's going on over there. Cyber warfare is one of the most difficult topics to discuss in an unclassified forum like this. And whatever we're going to discuss here will be one small fraction of what is actually happening out there. And people like Jan Panam, people like ABM Ranjan, these are the people who may be actually having more insights into what exactly is happening there. And to my mind, even their insights will be another fraction. And therefore, if we put all these fractions together with all the countries trying to figure out as to what is happening over there, and therefore, because so much of the attrition which is happening over there, it still remains to be unclassified. So, we all know about the Russian cyber attacks towards walking into Ukraine. That took about 20,000 odd satellite terminals across Europe as the invasion of Ukraine was underway. Is an example of day zero enabling effect. Is what it is. So I think what I will do now is, since we are in the terms of international cooperation and see as to what is the policy that should come, let me call upon the policy consultant, Mr. Deepak Maheshwari, to say a few words as to how you want to converge all this together.
Thank you, sir, and thanks for your opening remarks. So when we are looking at this whole thing around space and cybersecurity, I think we should also look at 4 different aspects. So there's a space segment, there's a link, there's a ground segment, and there's a user. So when we are talking about cybersecurity for space, it needs to be integrated, it needs to be comprehensive, covering all these 4 segments. On the other hand, if we are looking at international cooperation and standards, etc., that was mentioned, now there again, for example, apart from NASA, in the US, NIST has also come out with a framework for space cybersecurity. European Space Agency has also come out with something. And I'm sure that within India, ISRO, DRDO, etc., would also be working on this, and probably after some time we should be having something around that at that stage. Now there are 2 other aspects that we should look at. One is that the forthcoming National Cybersecurity Strategy, on which the Office of the National Cybersecurity Coordinator and the National Security Council Secretariat had already done a consultation a few years back. Probably that's one thing which needs to be refreshed, a fresh consultation, and very specifically, there has to be a section within that in terms of space cybersecurity. Currently, if you look at the National Cybersecurity Policy 2013, which was released on 3rd of July, it doesn't even mention the word space at all. So that's one particular area that we should look at very specifically in terms of the policy. The other aspect is related to the kinetic impact. So yes, there could be security breaches, there could be data breaches, etc. But there could also be kinetic impact. For example, if you are signals about positioning, whether using GPS, NAVIC, or any such other system, that gets manipulated. If that gets weaponized, you can actually send, whether it's a aeroplane or a car or anything else, or even a ship, in a different direction or somewhere else. The second thing related to that is in terms of kinetic impact is what happens to any such asset in the space. So suppose you overheat something. If you send too much of signal for something, and if a component gets overheated, software is something which probably one could still remotely try to manage. But if a hardware component gets overheated or undercooled, when it becomes extremely brittle, or if it melts or does something there, then obviously it has a very catastrophic impact which just cannot be repaired remotely. So I think these are the other type of things also that we should consider in terms of the kinetic impact. So when we are looking at this whole thing in terms of the space and cybersecurity, one is that people from all these domains need to be on the the same table in that sense. So, for example, from the cyber security, from CERT, etc., everywhere, those agencies. Currently, if you look at even National Critical Information Infrastructure Protection Center, space segment itself is not even classified as one of the critical sectors. So we have 6 earlier, then adding 7th, which will help after the COVID and of course the incident. But I think space is another one which deserves to be there. So let me just stop here at this round and thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Maheshwari. One of the most interesting things that I got out of you is let us sort out the internal enemies and then let's worry about who will attack us from outside. So let's talk about these guys who get heated up inside and these guys who are not able to interwork amongst themselves and how they are going to do that. And therefore, there is a definition. There is a definition of what is called as the Space Defense Operational Area. So let us understand what should be the Space Defense Operational Area. And one of the definitions put forth was it is an orbital space around which the processes established to maintain minimum mutual interference. And I think that's a very interesting thing that you brought about. Yeah.
In fact, Mr. Garg is sitting here, the former wireless advisor. So this minimum mutual interference. Now this is actually a concept which also comes from the spectrum management if you see. So all the whole concept is that yes, there should be minimum interference, but in one particular area it becomes extremely pronounced, and that is in the case of delicensing. So whether you look at 2.4 band or 5 GHz band or any other band, wherever there is a delicensing, there are 3 cardinal principles. No interference, no protection, and the third one is no exclusivity. So these are the 3 things that this becomes like a global commons. So yes, everybody needs to behave in a civil manner in that sense, that nobody should overshout, nobody should trespass over others, things like that. So I think those are the type of principles that we can sort of import and incorporate in here. Thank you.
Absolutely, sir. So I think without wasting much time, what I request is Group Captain Anand Naidu, from ISAC. He's going to elaborate a little more on these aspects and tell us what you think about the whole thing. Good job.
Thank you very much, and also first thanks to the SA for giving me this opportunity. I am from Information Sharing and Analysis Center, a cyber security non-profit organization with certain elements of cyber security being done under the ISAC. I do not know how many of you know that ISRO has been reached more than once. 100 computers from MeitY, Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, managed, maintained, given by NIC, have lost data. 100 computers. And most of it pertaining to the regulatory aspects which were very critical. We had Kundakulam nuclear power plant being reached. Fortunate because the resilience was good, response was fantastic, we did not have losses. Now that's within India. A 15-year-old boy was put under surveillance. Through that, the threat actor gets access to the command and control center of a satellite station of a nation, and 3 years the data gets stolen. A civil engineer, not very careful about how he uses the email and other cyber technologies, he has his email ID breached. A critical information infrastructure structure, the building that was to be built for a nation, all the maps, all the details, all the plans get stolen. The threat actors possess minute details of what room is meant for what activity, what are the facilities being given. This is what has happened 10 years back. Today, we are in a different world as far as cyberspace is concerned. We are at war Unfortunately, many of us don't know that we are at war. There are state actors, non-state actors. Now, when we talk about the space industry, like it's been explained, the four elements, and if we have to survive, sustain, and succeed in terms of whether the platforms that are there up or ground stations security. The triad for the cyber security is people, process, and technologies. And we always harp upon the people because they are the most critical and important element. Now, when we talk about the people, two things happen. One is the skill gap. Two, the professional ethics that are integral to everyone's functioning. When I say professional ethics, it could be cyber hygiene, like I was talking about the civil engineer who was not cautious. By the way, the latest data leak that has happened has actually originated from a small startup company in Bangalore. One of the employees having his email ID breached and not reporting it and not taking action. That's how the packets were delivered to the media. So, it's possible that some of us are becoming root cause for the breach to happen even in the critical sectors or a sector which is not yet declared as critical information infrastructure sector as far as India is concerned. So the people become very, very important. Professional ethics, including how we behave in our cyberspace, becomes very, very important. We have started giving very highly advanced gadgets to the children. Trust me, the people who are working in startups in the space sector, the people who are working in the operations in the space sector, people who are working in the military, dealing with the space sector, if they have cyber hygiene at a certain level, it's going to benefit them immensely. Next is, A.V.M. Ranjan mentioned about security by design. When we get a software coded, we give certain expectations to the coders. One is on the functional aspect. The other one is on the how nicely it is, interface is given, how nice experience, UI UX. How many times do we set the security element as one of the expectations for the software to be developed? Are our coders by design secure in thinking? That is where skilling to the minimum level of security for the coders and testers and all the people who are dealing with the software is very essential. So we see that one level is hygiene for everyone. In fact, I can take an example here of GMR. GMR has about 6,000 employees. GMR Group has decided to put all of them into a cyber security hygiene program, which we conducted to them, and they have seen the result evident. Obviously, whenever they done the mock attacks, they have been successful in not being breached. That's where hygiene plays a role. There are many companies which do that. The second level, what I talked about is security by design, which A.V.M. Ranjan also has mentioned. Next is the simulation platforms that we need to make use of. Now, when we say simulation platforms, Mr. Pathak in the previous session was mentioning about digital twinning, creating a physical aspect in a digital space and making sure that we have a platform where we can try and test how it will behave, possibly forecast to avoid any disasters or make sure that we have plans to mitigate those disasters. In space sector, it becomes very, very essential, especially with so many actors who are playing all the time. And we do know that some of the friends also become enemies in space sector. It's not that there need be enmity between countries or actors to actually breach. It can be actually some of our friends who are trying to find out what we are doing, and many times inadvertently that can lead to breaches. The debris and the debris coming down and the data leak that is possible for that. The amount of data that is created by a spacecraft is many times the data created by even an aircraft. So how do we manage the data at the ground station? How do we protect that data? very, very important. That's where we say the security has to be looked at in two spectrums. One is the IT security. IT security is communication and other aspects. With quantum, of course, I leave it to Mr. Pradeep to speak on it. And the AI that has come into play today, and the generative AI that has actually disrupted. It is helping the cyber security community in one way, but creating more problems in the other way. So that is one, IT security. The next is IoT, OT security. That's going to be a very, very big problem for us, because all of us talk about it. The platforms that are there up in the space are enabling networking, but that also is a problem. That if that is based, what next? That's where we have to have simulation platforms for the OT security. Now OT security is where there is going to be bloodshed on the floor shop if it is not managed properly. And that's where the lives may be lost. That's where the satellites can come crashing if there is a breach. So what we talked about, 4 elements, those 4 elements to us, to simply put it, IT and OT security and IoT security is included in that. That's where skilling has to happen. That's where simulation platforms will have to be used by the stakeholders to understand how a certain product or a certain technology is working. That's where we can make a change in case if we can have the simulation platforms in place, and we can definitely benefit. With that, I will stop for now. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Incredible. Talked about hygiene and talked about by design, as the chairman also talked. But I will tell you one thing. One of the most disruptive assaults that ever took place in the recent past is the attack on the Viasat KSAT network, which interrupted internet access for thousands across Europe. It highlighted the strategic significance of satellites as critical targets for cyber adversaries. These are not isolated incidents, and like the chairman also pointed out to me, there are more than about 100 attacks per day that are happening as we talk, and so they mark an escalating trend for sophisticated cyber actors, and it increasingly recognizes the potential for devastating disruption to satellite-based attacks. So let us go towards the Strategic Alliance Incorporation. I'll remove the I from the ISAC and request Abhi Thorat to talk a little more on this, and what is this disruption and what is it that we can do? Yeah.
So thank you. So the way I would like to, it's the pleasure, it's an honor to sit at this panel like this. So the way I look at things is from 2 aspects. So one is the technology architecture, that my colleagues mentioned about IT and OT, and the technical architecture of the way it is spec'd out, such as you have the space systems, you have the ground control, the space and the space link, and so that's more of the technology part, right? And yeah, technology is technology, right? It's just you bring up, you power up a PC, you connect it to the internet, and within like a couple of hours you have all different types of attacks from all different parts of civilization trying to access. So that's just an acceptable reality today. That's one thing, which is the technology aspect, right? And then the other is I'd see it as a non-technology from executive level perspective, executive business level, or any organization level, where they have to ensure that the business objectives are met. So for them, for a business owner or a person who's to get some payload downloads, and if you talk about the satellite operators, for them it's about the risk. So they're talking about the risk and managing the risk, and for them it's a resiliency. Right? So if I have to launch a constellation, say 7 satellites today. So I go out and see who are the satellite operators, what are the launching people. It was very limited launch organization. But in terms of say ground station people, so mission control, I would look for who has the best residency and the other components right, that go with the risk management, as colleagues mentioned, such as incident response plans. So I would ask them, okay, do you have incident response plans? Yes, let's say that's sure. The next question I would ask is, okay, when was the last time you tested the incident response? So yeah, things of this nature at a more of a policy and procedure level. And I do understand it, the technology people, the engineers, they're not like big fans of policies, procedures, rules. They see it as a barrier for creativity, spontaneity. We get it, right? But from a business ownership perspective, business executive perspective, just looking for resiliency. Is I think during the last session we had a power outage. I think it lasted for 12 seconds, which is I think fine in terms of just terrestrial, right? We're sitting here on our chairs, sofa chairs, normal chairs. So 12 seconds of power outage I think is acceptable, terrestrial. But when it comes to non-terrestrial environment, I think the expectations are changing, such as if we talk in terms of space 1.0, space 1.0 and space 2.0. Space 1.0, the drivers were different, the challenges, barriers, drivers were different. Right? It was the more focus was on like reliability, right? Make the system super reliable, even if they're low performance, that's fine. So there was a lot of like risk awarenessness. People were less risk averse. They don't want to take risks. Because the parameters they were operating, even at a physical level, the satellites in the orbits were, they had a lot of space among each other, and they had a lot of tolerance levels are pretty high. But as we talk about today, which is like space 2.0, there's just literal like overcrowding of satellites, and then there's high risk collisions. In these collisions we talk about inadvertent plus advertent, right? We don't know. And then the other aspect is, as one of my other colleagues mentioned, is about the debris. Right? Again, the debris is inadvertent or advertent, right? Because recently Russia tested one of their anti-satellite technology, which is ASAT, and they did it to get rid of one of their unfunctioning satellites, but it caused a lot of debris, and that debris put the ISS at risk. Some of the astronauts that were in the space, they put them at risk, and they had to take cover. So yeah, so space 2.0 is just it's similar to it's subjected to similar levels and types and complexities of risks as compared to the terrestrial. And and I think it's just calling for more attention and ways of standardizing, and just as one of my colleagues is from ISAC. Right? So the way we are looking at it is, so we are working with other critical infrastructure industries. One is like power utilities, and there's like ISACs for each of these. And the way we are seeing is, because space is relatively new, it wasn't as hard connected or as hardwired as the IT networks. So we're saying, okay, how are the other industries managing the risks? What are their policies? What are the procedures? What are the standards? What are the frameworks? As even Deepak mentioned about NIST. Right? So there's NIST for, so we do a lot of US-based projects. So there's NIST for different industries. So there's a NIST for agriculture, there's a NIST for manufacturing, for oil refineries. And a lot of these, if you look at it from a technology perspective, so they're more like OT-centric, right? IoT OT-centric, where you have a device out there, it has like firmware and some software and such. It's all interconnected. So for the space, it's very slow, just like thinking what you mentioned about. For space, you have the ground station and satellites and user segment. And then there's the NIST, I think one of the gentlemen mentioned. This NIST has standards 8401 is for ground station systems. So we are focusing on that. But again, it's very it's not spec'd out fully yet. So what they do is they take a NIST 800-171, which is sort of the closest resemblance they have, and then they try to clone it. But it's just these regulations, or no, these frameworks they're more, the level of efficacy increases once people start adopting it and using it, and they give feedback via ISAC to the standards people, and then they, update it, and then it's like a refinement process. It happens over a long period of time, but the sooner it starts, the better it is. And yeah, that's what I would propose. Cool.
Yeah, while you were talking, and you were talking about the risks and all that, I got reminded of a small story I thought I should tell you about. So this was the time when I was posted in the MOD sometime in 2005. There was a huge, if you know the South Block and that area around, there was a huge effort in removing those monkeys from there. The monkeys were all around, and they used to actually come into our offices inside the South Block and all that. And especially it was so difficult to walk in those corridors after about 6, 7 o'clock before the normal time that we used to leave 7, sometimes 8. We as human beings have started going and invading areas which do not belong to us. And when we go and invade these areas, actually Goa, this space, does not really belong to us. We are going and invading into a space, and we are going and invading in the most ill-disciplined manner. And therefore the risks are associated, and therefore we are talking about cybersecurity challenges today, and therefore we are going to talk a little more. And that brings me to the point of space sovereignty. How do you define space sovereignty? So, one of the definitions that I came across on this is that it's a nation's inherent right to exercise absolute control and authority over its orbital space near its satellite. Now, your satellites are not in one coherent geographical or space area. So, you will get a slot and you have to go and fix yourself there. So then, what is the space sovereignty mission and how do you do this? So while I was thinking of all this, and Guru Captain Naidu also very briefly mentioned, I'm going to go to Mr. Pradeep Kumar, who is the co-founder of Qubits, and while we are going to listen from him, I just want to give you a very brief background on quantum technologies. And quantum technologies have got a very significant impact on space encryption. If you ask me why, the question is because traditional encryption methods rely on mathematical algorithms, mathematical models. And they become very vulnerable the moment you start going into quantum. And the promising alternative, of course, is quantum cryptography, which uses light particles for tamper-evident encoding. So what really happens is, you convert the data into light particles and beam them around the world using satellites, and probably you can prevent encrypted messages from being intercepted by powerful quantum computers too. So, Mr. Pradeep, can I really ask you to dwell a little bit on this and also tell us how quantum technologies affect encryption technologies? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, everyone. So first of all, I know that I am the guy who is between you and the lunch. So
that session has been extended infinitely. Don't worry.
Yeah. So just to share, Mr. Dubey has already mentioned most of my speech. So I would say thanks to him. Yeah. So just to, I can talk of Leverage, ASAT and lots of things which I think our friends have already talked of. Let's take up a few scenarios. Let's say that there is your password, let's say for Google, and it has a AES encryption, let's say 256 or 128, and it's hard to break computationally, mathematically. But what if you get to know that there is a different techniques like quantum computing, which can perform lots of mathematical operations within a second or maybe in a no time. Then, then what do you think? That if my Google password, I think it's useless to me or what? But the bigger challenge what we are facing as of now is we have to think that what's the point? If someone wants to invest $1 million and get your password, is it worth? No. So that's how I think we all should think of. And considering, an old movie named Matrix, where we see that lots of things are happening, suddenly Neo sees, and he sees that, oh, the world is not like this. So this is the same concept which quantum computing has brought. People have been working on encryptions and all those things, but what if all these encryptions, they make no sense? They make no sense to you. Because quantum computing is really two, I would say, very significant properties. One is superposition and entanglement. Don't worry, I'm not going to give a lecture on that. So basically, like our colleagues, our friends have already mentioned, that one is the payload, the transponder, to be more precise. So transponder is nothing but transmit and then response. So let's say if the device which is transmitting and whatever is responding, so if there is some attack and it's at the response side, and let's say nowadays if people ask me that if we all are connected to satellite, if there is any impact on that, I would say yes. Let's take a simple example. Long time back, I was going to one of our clients, and I was following Google Map, and I landed up at a wrong destination. That was a government office. I asked them, why is it so? They said, we have done it deliberately. I was very surprised. It was around 10 years back. I said, why would anyone do that? Getting to the location and GPS. In the same way, if you think there is an aircraft which is going, nowadays our aircraft is also connected to satellites. Now people don't have to do the hijacking of aircraft. What if they hijack the satellite communication and they guide the pilot to a different location? Now they don't have to do the hijacking at all. In the same way, there are numerous examples which I think, and there is a recent statement, the biggest concern of US, both are friends. So regarding China, it's not like the biggest concern they are facing as of now is because the investment done by China in quantum computing, it has been slightly more than US. And in a note, I think people also mentioned that whoever conquers or whoever takes the lead in quantum computing, he will eventually take lead on all these aspects, on all the security aspects. And as Colonel Dubey has already mentioned, why do we all intervene or try to go to some other place which does not belong to us? And in the same way, like in the internet, as we know that the internet doesn't belong to a single person, and that's the reason we see lots of threats in it. In the same way, cyberspace, I think, I think it's a no-man's land, and we all can imagine if there is something which does not belong to anyone, how human treat to it. So this is, and just to mention about QKD, PQC, and QRNG. So just sharing one more example. Since long, I think people have been using DRNG. What if you get to know that it's not a true random at all? Quantum computing emphasizes on such aspects that whatever you have been using, now it's all questionable. We always used to say DRNG good and number generator. It's a very simple thing. What it is, just generate a true random number. But if you follow from a quantum philosophy, I think whatever DRNG you have been using, it's not a DRNG at all. So that's where the birth of QRNC has come. Nowadays, you must be seeing in your banking and all these places, QRNC is being used rather than TRNC. In the same way, PQC, PQC has got nothing to do with quantum, just to share. It is like post-quantum cryptography. It states that some algorithms which are not mathematically dependent, I mean, what quantum does, it just speeds up the things. So what if there is an algorithm, even if you guys it speeds up the things, it does not crack the algorithm because it's not based on the mathematical phenomena. So that's where, I mean, NIST, as our friends, they have already spoken about NIST. So there are some algorithms which NIST has listed. If you follow those algorithms in encryption, so it is as of now it is being said that quantum computing it will not be able to break them. That's how they are called PQC, post-quantum cryptography. In the same way, I mean, there is one QKD, which is generally just quantum key distribution. I mean, just to transfer the key from one place to another. So another advantage what quantum brings is, let's say if there is an intrusion activity or if there is an unauthorized access, at least because of the entanglement, at least you get to know that it is compromised. I'll just go back to the same example. If I get to know that it is a different location, at least people will know that okay, it has been compromised. So at least it will make people aware of handling the upcoming situations. Thank you. I just my stuff over here.
Thank you, Pradeep. That was good. And while you were talking about it, I was thinking, what is the role of forensics in cybersecurity? And how do we bring about the integration of forensics into cybersecurity and things like that? And as promised, we have concluded the session exactly at 12:45. But I'm told that it is extended for some time. So I would like to open it to the audience. So would you like to say something?
I was just thinking as we are moving to the edge in the new space, would it be possible for ISAC to say that you could put a satellite or an in-space segment under cyber arrest? And if it so happens, what is the defense and how do you release it?
Okay, to put a satellite from the cyber range for simulations, that's what you are meaning, sir. Possibility is very much there. Now, it's something which is the surface, attack surface for other satellites is so very large that one, to stop the interference in our own platforms, how we can do it is the defensive mechanisms. To interfere with others, which is not the thing that we are supposed to do, is possible if someone wants to do that. Launching a satellite with those simulations on board is possible.
Yeah, light is flashing on my face. You were asking a question. Say a little louder, please.
Pranav Satyanath, independent researcher.
Pranav Satyanath, yeah.
My question is to Mr. Maheshwari and also to the other panelists in general. A.V. Rajan mentioned in his remarks that India should develop cyber norms internationally. So, in your perspective, what are the cyber norms that India can actually push for in ITU or in other UN agencies? Thank you.
Just for the sake of time, can we take a few questions and then together? Yeah. Youngest guy right behind. You have to throw the mic to him.
May I ask one question?
After.
Hi. Yeah, my name is Naresh. I'm a research assistant in space policy from CSER. So my question is to Mr. Deepak. Since startups are targeting defense as their primary customer, adding secure by design, makes much more harder for them since they don't have a lot of funding, and also they're using commercial off-the-grid components. it's vulnerable to cyber attacks in the first place. So do you think defense should take any sort of initiatives to help the companies make it more cyber secure? Because they don't have enough amount to make it more secure because it has a lot of cost to them as well. So what sort of initiatives can the defense take, or do you think it falls on the responsibility of the startups itself?
Yeah, just one more question after that we conclude. So yours.
Yeah, myself, Professor Mansoor Gupta, and I work in the area of cybersecurity since like 20 years. As per the very description which is given by your Captain Mr. Anand, that we have to think about the IT security, IoT security. As we all are aware that we are living in the digital era, we are living in the electronic era where we are communicating with each other through the vulnerable wireless network like the internet. So I think as he has given the example of the one civil engineer who is not aware about the security, IT security, much aware about it. So he may lapse regarding the cyber security. So I think we have to conduct more and more cyber security awareness program to each and every employee of our organization. So whosoever is involved in such type of project, maybe the security engineer, maybe the civil engineer, maybe the architecture, maybe the mechanical engineer. So everyone should be aware about the cyber security. Whatever part he is delivering, so he can take care of the cyber security in their perspective, as well as he has described about the security by design, and sir is already aware about the importance of quantum cryptography. We are aware that right now we are using multiple encryption algorithms like AES is there, RSC is there, ECC is there, DSA is there, DSA is there. I think right now, whatever digital transaction we are doing, we are using the AES 128 bit encryption, which is quite secure right now because till now it is unregulated. So whenever we are talking about the quantum cryptography, so first we have to see what type of resources we are having. If we are talking about that India, then what type of resources we are having in our organization which we can implement. So right now, if we are using the AES which is unregulated, so I think that we are using it. Yes, whenever we will think that we have to move ahead, then obviously we can talk about the quantum cryptography because at that moment in future we will be having some type of resources through which we can implement the quantum cryptography and we can enhance the security. So I think such type of cyber security awareness program we have to conduct more and more. Right.
3 points. One, in terms of cyber norms. Cyber norms are under discussion for decades now at global level. Not just ITU, at UN General Assembly, etc. So there was an open-ended working group and others. So they have produced those reports. But currently, we do not see the geopolitical situation amenable for a reasonable cyber norms to be set up at that level. So currently there is a lot of differences in different countries, and I don't see a possibility, at least in the next 2 to 3 years, for globally acceptable cyber norms to be implemented and adopted and actually accepted and executed by people. Second question was related to the cybersecurity design investment needed by the startups, etc. Now, whether it's a startup or a large organization, these things are essential, and if you do not take care of these things, not only there's a harm to that particular company or that particular module, but there are bigger harms to the nation as well as to the larger systems in which it is going to be a part of. Now, who does that investment is more of a risk share, gain share type of thing. So, I mean, if somebody else is sort of sharing the pain, they should also be in a position to share the gain. But obviously, the procurement agencies or the people who are responsible for these type of public-private partnerships, they should have some reasonable resources to sensitize and also support these type of startups in their journey so that you have much better secure system. Third point, very limited on encryption. Since 6th of August 1999, we have been having different encryption norms being proposed by different arms of the government, starting from the Department of Telecommunications on 6th of August 1999, when they did talk about that you cannot use more than 40-bit encryption on the internet. Then we had RBI saying you cannot use less than 128 bit. We had CB that had 64 or 128, and for the longest time we had IRCTC as the largest example of those days, at least, of e-governance / e-commerce, I would say, where they were using 128. Today the situation is factually, no matter what encryption you are using in the country, including for income tax, anything, you are flouting one or the other norms. On 15th of September 2015, the government did come out with a draft encryption policy, but withdrew it within 4 or 5 days. So that's the current situation on encryption. So I would say that encryption is something quite difficult to decrypt at this point of time. Thank you.
Okay, I just want to add a couple of points. One is, morning there was a position released. There are certain aspects in terms of what is the status today and what we can do together. There was one question on startups and how they can be protected. They do not have budgets for the cyber security, and that's the aspect that was asked. In fact, General Bamu is one of the national cyber security scholars, and we also had General Pant, who was the national cyber security coordinator as part of the scholar program that we run, ISAC runs. Then Nair as well. So this community has recommended that we must have our own bug platform for India, and we have something known as Breachpoint. The collaboration between ISAC and SIA is also to extend the services of the bug bounty platform, the private bug bounty platform for the space sector, because public bug bounty platform can have some difficulties as far as the space sector is concerned.
Declare that as the people are looking towards the stars, the space utilization is increasing, but at the same time vulnerability is also increasing. Primarily the dependence is increasing. Secondly, the peculiarity of the space assets in the space and the ground being long longevity, the chances of vulnerability is going to be more. So therefore, you need to be more aware. You have to have your crisis management program, etc., so as to protect yourself. Policy is work in progress, especially for the global acceptance. Standards, testing, certification, all this is also evolving, because the space and the cyber merger is just in the last 3 to 4 years. In all, the bottom line, as one of the question and some kind of suggested question was awareness. If we are aware, that's the first gate where we will stop the threat. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been a fantastic audience, and all that I have to say is this. When the chairman says that the government will have to fund, I really have my doubts if the government is serious in funding these things. I was just seeing the European Development Fund, and very recently they have funded 56 projects for 1.06 billion euros. And when I go through those 56 projects, they are all studies. Have we ever conducted any studies in space? Have we conducted any studies in cyber sovereignty? Have we conducted any studies, and have we funded them to the extent that they should be funded? Because if you fund 20 lakhs from IDEX, or some 2 crores from IDEX Prime, or some other 10 crores from Aditi, you will get only that much. So therefore, I think we need to increase our funding, create those studies, and that's why the monkey story is important. Monkeys will still be there because that's their land. We have encroached on their land. So we have gone and encroached into the space, and therefore I want the powers that be to understand this. And I give you a little bit into Vedic philosophy and say, Om Bhuhu is earth. Bhuha, I talked about Om Bhuha. After that, Om Swaha, Om Maha, Om Janaha, Om Tapa, Om Satyam. Satyalokta, I mean, it has been defined. If we understand, if we go into the Vedic philosophy, understand as to what we are dealing with, and create those studies, I think we will be in good shape. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I hand you over to you. Thank you. An excellent panel, sir. Thank you so much. I think the panelists deserve a very huge applause. Ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Just the last comment which I would like to add, as Colonel Kubir has just mentioned, that the importance of education and innovation, I think it needs to be boosted up in our country. And just taking an example, I mean, recent times, a couple of years, 2-3 years back, Chinese, I mean, they were trying to tap the NASA's this thing, the satellite, and they were just hovering around and then capturing the data. So do we think that US and they were not following these encryptions and all those things? No. But yes, now there needs to be a need for coming up with new innovations so that we can come up with a new ideas so that we can encounter unforeseen problems also. Not just because the problems which are given in the literature and then try to follow them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Indeed, an insightful and engaging session. We start with the felicitation ceremony. May I request the chair to kindly felicitate. We start with the moderator, Colonel K.V. Kuber. May I request the chair to kindly felicitate. Group Captain Anand Naidu. Mr. Ravi Thorat. Mr. Deepak Maheshwari. Mr. Pradeep Kumar. I request Lieutenant General Count to kindly come and felicitate our chair of the session, ADM Rajavaranjan. And we also have one big group picture as well. All of you together. Thank you very much, gentlemen, once again. With this, we come to the end of this session. So, we have a gap of 30 minutes, followed by a lunch break. So, we'll resume again here at 2:30 post lunch. Also at 2:30 in the Regal Hall, you can join in for a startup research session. All the entrepreneurs, mentors, investors, industry experts can get together at 2:30 hours in the Regal Hall to unlock the opportunity, access resources, and accelerate your path to success in the space industry. It's a dynamic platform dedicated to fueling the ambitions of visionary startups, fostering collaboration, innovation, and boundless potential of entrepreneurial endeavors. So, it's a startup research session at 2:30 hours in the Regal Hall. See you after the lunch break. Thank you.